And we're back. And Pastor Dave Bryan is back here with me. And we have a very special guest. Tell us who our special guest is.
I would love to. Our very special guest is a dear friend of mine. And I'm so honored that Dr. David Martin is able to join us. And I have a lot to thank Dr. David Martin for. Welcome, David. Thank you for being here. One of the busiest men I know. Let's hear it for Dr. David Martin.
Thank you.
Who's a friend of mine and a friend of this house. Thank you, David, for being here.
Hey, you bet. It's a delight to be here. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm coming to you from inside the barn.
All right.
So those cages behind me, Dave, those are not prison bars. Those are
okay.
Those are stalls for the horses.
That's great. Well, thank you for taking time to be with us here. And David, I've talked to you more really about the peace of heaven and the vision than just about anybody. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate your encouragement. And I also appreciate the connections you've made. You've been very, very significant in connecting us to Mission Safe Harbor and others. And we just really want to thank you. And you are one of the most articulate and informed people that I know anywhere on the blue planet. So just tell us, if you would, why do you think this is an important venture and worthwhile?
Well, so listen, one of the things that I wanted to say is that, you know, it's actually comic. I'm standing in the barn right now. The wood that's cut behind me is from the trees that we've felled so that I can make the furniture here in Kim and my home in Virginia. But there's kind of an irony here that we're standing in a barn and we're talking about this situation. Most people don't remember that the way Jesus started out his life is being on the run.
Yeah.
You know, there was an edict that was sent out by Caesar Augustus that was supposed to actually have all the children under the age of 2 killed. But for the hospitality of Egypt and the foresight of Mary and Joseph and getting him down to Egypt, you know, we wouldn't even have this conversation right now. So I want to start by saying, you know, we're in the long, proud tradition of looking after kids. This is not something that's new. And the entirety of our faith is based on the principle of the little children have to be our top priority. As you've done to the least of these, my children, you've done unto me. This
Come on, David.
You know, that you can't get more real than that, ladies and gentlemen. And so standing here in the barn, I wanted to share with you that, you know, there are tons of stories around the world of how people grow up in adverse situations. And every one of them is tragic. Every one of them is reprehensible. There's not an acceptable situation on this planet where a young child should ever be subject to any form of torture, abuse, or anything else. This is a world in which we've normalized it and we've accepted it way too long.
Right.
And that's come across multiple areas. But I also wanted to point out something really incredible. Many of you know me from the work I've done with trying to bring justice around all kinds of tragedies around the world. I've tried to bring justice in places where there's been conflict, you know, mining abuses, other kinds of abuses, human trafficking, slavery, all sorts of things. So I've seen all of this stuff firsthand, and I've lived it for 30 years of my life. And one of the things that I actually know from my own lived experience is that one of the things that fueled my passion for reaching out and being part of ending suffering for others was the fact that I did not always have the most lovely situation in terms of how I grew up and what I was exposed to, and ultimately the things that were done physically and otherwise in my life. And I want to be really clear on the fact that if we're going to have a bright future, we have to actually look at the fact that every child who actually can have any suffering mitigated, however that suffering is mitigated, is a child who doesn't grow up with the scars and the torture and the trauma that ultimately has to be unraveled by things later in life. The more we can actually focus on, let's make sure that we're taking care of kids, the more we actually are saving from not only this generation's problems, but future generations' problems. And when I was working on all the COVID matters that a lot of you are familiar with, I was frequently asked, well, where are we with this prosecution? Where are we with this lawsuit? Where are we with this action? Where are we with holding various people accountable? And I got to a point of really sitting with that for a while and saying, well, hold on a minute. Why am I being asked this? Where are you? Where are you right now? Somebody should do something. It's actually not an out there statement. It's actually an opportunity to reflect on, what am I doing today? What is the thing I've done today to make a difference? There's always someone out there somewhere that should be doing something. And tonight, your opportunity is actually to be the person that is doing something, not the person who's saying somebody should be doing something. I had a dear friend, and I deal with this topic in my movie, Future Dreaming. So if you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's on YouTube. You can have a look at it. But in my movie, Future Dreaming, I pointed out to a very interesting life experience I had. I was in India. I was driving in a limousine to the parliament for a very, very sophisticated meeting with the parliament of India. And we stopped at a light. And remember, I'm sitting in a limousine. In the back of the limousine, there's a person sitting next to me, a dear friend of mine, Mr. Anil Gupta, phenomenal guy, lovely professor from Ahmedabad, India. And I'm sitting on the other side. And next to me, there was a man on the street with very few remnants left of his arms and legs. And he was holding a cup in his armpit, begging on the side of the road. And I looked at my friend Anil Gupta, and I said, Anil, I don't know how you live here. How do you live where we have such a stark contrast that we could be sitting in a limousine, and here's a person with no arms and no legs, and he's sitting there begging on the side of the road. And Anil smiled, and he looked at me, and he said, David, he goes, that's the proof there's a God. And I stopped him, and I said, Anil, no, that's not the proof there's a God. That's proof that God left the building, right? That shouldn't be possible. That guy shouldn't be sitting on the side of the road. And he goes, no, you're missing it. He goes, if you stopped everybody who's gone through this intersection, ask how many of them actually saw that man. He goes, I can guarantee you that 99% of the people who drove through this intersection did not see that guy. He goes, but you did. That's the proof there's a God. And then he looked at me and told me one of the pieces of wisdom that I've held for the rest of my life. He said to me, he said, David, a merciful God only gives you eyes to see that which you can do something about.
Whoa.
Wow. Come on, David.
Now, I sat there in that moment. I sat there and I was so convicted in that moment of going, oh my goodness, what an amazing piece of insight. You don't get aware of things, right? We didn't get aware of the COVID injustice. We didn't get aware of what was happening with the EpiPens and what happened in 9/11. We didn't get aware of these things so that we can somehow just be edified with our own voyeuristic interest in what's happening in the world.
Come on,
We
David.
got to see what we got to see because a merciful God gives you only that which you are called to have action around.
Come on.
Whoa.
Come on,
And
David.
as such, if you are listening to this, if you are actually listening to the replay of this, the call to you is not to go, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's inspirational. You only have been chosen to know this information because you are being called into action.
Beautiful.
That's why you see it. That's why you know about it. That's why you can hear the story you just heard of a woman whose heart is broken because of what had been done in her trafficking experience. If we listen and if we hear, if you have eyes to see, if you have ears to hear, it is not for merely your information. It is your call to action. And that is the reason why Kim and I have been so supportive from the very beginning of Piece of Heaven, of making sure that everything that can be done to make this a reality happens. And we will continue to do that with our heart, with our minds, with our treasure, with all the things that we can bring to bear, because we want to make sure that when we are held to account, we have said, we actually suffered the little children to come unto us and actually find peace. Why? Because Kim and I, both as children, did not experience the peace that we want to see others have. And we want to make sure we've done everything we can to change that energy in this world.
Come on.
Wow.
David, never a disappointment. Thank you for the inspiration. And I want to personally thank you, of course, for your friendship. Cheryl and I love you and Kim very, very much. Thank you for the encouragement you've been from the very beginning. And I also want to thank you for the key introductions you've made. For those of you that are listening, you know that we've partnered with Mission Safe Harbor. And it was David that connected us with Mission Safe Harbor and has made a lot of connections, but mainly your encouragement, David. Thank you very, very much. And I know how busy you are. You're always a inspiration to us here at the Church of Glad Tidings. And by the way, you need to come visit us again soon. Thank you that you're here.
Let's get it on the calendar and let's make sure it happens before the end of the year, Dave. We'll do that.
Let's do that. David, thank you so much for coming to join us, and thank you for that amazing inspiration that you've given us. We love you. Give Kim our very best, and thank you again for being here tonight.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you.